Don't stop believing. Can you believe the last time I updated on the Tucson Roadrunners was when Anthony Duclair was here, and now he's been gone for quite a while now, and wow, time really flies, and we haven't really gotten much better since Anthony Duclair has left, so fun times, really fun times here in Tucson. So in case you guys have not watched my previous channels, I have currently gotten a job, or I currently have a job with AZ Desert Swarm, or Arizona Desert Swarm, I just call it AZ Desert Swarm, which is a online blog about, just pretty much covers all of the University of Arizona sports and also covers now the Tucson Roadrunners. So I work with them and I cover U of A sports, and I now also cover the Roadrunners. And I will update you guys on games I go to and stuff I cover, and pretty much everything that I go and cover I actually write an article about, but I'm also going to make a video about. So if you guys are interested, you can obviously watch the videos here, or you can go to the website, not my website. I'll link it down below, and you can go check out tons of stuff that was written by the other contributors there. They're really awesome. You can check out stuff that they've written. You can also check out stuff that I've written. I actually take a lot of photos more for the website than anything. I've taken photos for baseball, I've taken it for, or U of A baseball I should say, for U of A hockey, and now the Roadrunners. So really cool, fun opportunity. I almost said really fool opportunity because I combined cool and fun. But really awesome. You guys should check it out. And I actually recapped this entire weekend series that I'm going to talk about right now in an article, so you can also check that out. That will specifically be linked below. But I will also be including a little ode to one of my favorite Roadrunners, Christian Fischer, because who doesn't love Christian Fischer and his endeavors and now making it to the NHL, and from what I think, making himself a permanent NHLer. For the first game of the series on Friday night, I actually was photographing the game. I'll be honest, when I'm a photographer, all I really look for during the game is what looks like a good shot. If I see somebody coming down the wing, I will look for that, sort of compose it, and take the shot. I pretty much only look for good composition. I'm not looking at the technical side of, oh my gosh, did you see the way Michael Bunting was skating, or did you see the turnover by McBain? I'm not really into that when I'm photographing. However, if guys are standing out, I will notice that. Like a few weeks ago when I covered them the first time, I definitely noticed that Ryan McInnes was standing out. Like, this was like his game. Like, he was absolutely tearing it up. He even got a goal that night. So all this stuff, I sort of noticed that just because he was like in my shot a lot, and I was like, hey, you know what, I'm getting a lot of pictures of Ryan McInnes, he's kind of a standout. So I can notice those things, but for generally I'm not going to get into nitty gritty with the game. But overall, I can feel the emotion of the game and all that, and when I was photographing that game, it felt terrible. It just felt downright awful. Now, after the game, head coach Mark Lamb said that the game was very, hard fought, and pretty much they just couldn't find a way to score a goal, and that was pretty much their only downfall, which, very big downfall, but I get what he's saying. Now, I sort of had a different feeling on that. It felt like a very weak game. I didn't feel like anybody was standing out, really. It was just sort of a mess. And it was so funny, I actually found the game to be so awful and just sort of like dreadful to watch, because we actually got shut out for the second night in a row. So all that fun stuff, I felt that so much that I actually camped out in the third period. I camped out by Merrick Langhammer in the, not the Coyotes, wow, in the Roadrunners defensive zone, because honestly they weren't getting any offensive chances, so I thought, yeah, might as well go camp in the defensive zone, try to get something, out of these final 15 minutes, because I usually camp in the offensive zone because, they're pretty offensive, that's when you're going to get your exciting shots. No, not that game. I had to go to the defensive zone, and I pretty much just took pictures of Merrick Langhammer for the final 5-10 minutes because there's honestly nothing else going on. I mean, it was just sort of, the Roadrunners were never getting the puck quite established in either zone. I mean, thank goodness it wasn't getting established in their zone much, but yeah, it was just kind of a struggle where nothing seemed to be going right. They were just chasing it 100% of the time. So enough about the first game. Don't want to be a Debbie Downer and talk about, oh, the Roadrunners are so terrible, because I'm about to get to that, and it's going to be probably a little more Debbie Downy than that. But the end of their weekend was actually a very good time, I would say. I think it was, while we didn't come away with a win, we still fought very hard, I would say. And the Roadrunners honestly deserved that win, even though they didn't get it. Now, the only reason that they didn't get the win, I don't even think this is like a personal opinion or bias thing. I think pretty much everybody in the entire arena, and both teams thought it, was that everybody was screwed over by the refs that night. There were so many terrible calls, and it felt like every time there was a call, you didn't even see the penalty. Most of the time when you like see a penalty called, like you see the penalty happening and you're like, oh yeah, you know, that dude should get called for that. But no, it felt like it was just odd. It felt like the refs were just calling things to call things, and it was like they clearly interfered with the game and like overstepped their boundaries of like officiating it to now they were like dictating the game. I think somebody should like write a note or like give the memo to the refs that you're not supposed to do that. It even got so bad too when Tyler Gaudette was called for a tripping call. He went into the box, and of course he was not having any of it because it was a really weak call. He should have probably been called for interference instead of tripping, but absolutely weak. One of the weakest of the night. Honestly, just a good example of how terrible it was. And Bakersfield scores on the power play. So he comes on out and he's like, okay, yeah, that goal should not have been scored because I shouldn't have been in the box. So what does he do? He taps his stick on the ice and says to the ref, good job. And he doesn't even get time to go to the bench before he's put back in the box for unsportsmanlike conduct. And if that does not sum up that entire game, I don't know what does. Because as a ref, you're kind of supposed to be a little bit stronger than that, not cry when a player gets upset at you. Like, I understand Tyler Gaudette had a bit of an attitude, but their season hasn't been going great. The game hasn't been going great. The officiating was terrible. What else is he supposed to do? He gave attitude. He's human too, and he shouldn't have been given those penalties, and I think the refs just didn't know what they were doing whatsoever. Overall, I would say that the Roadrunners really, they did play well. I mean, if it wasn't for the bad officiating, they really would have won that game, and they deserved to win it because their power play was actually generating some chances. It wasn't that great. It was kind of hit or miss, but for the past few months, all it's been is miss. So to actually see us getting some opportunities, even if nothing was coming from it, on the power play, that was really neat because finally Fischer was being a staple on the power play again, and so was Jamie McBain, and everybody was kind of starting to establish themselves from the blob of the Roadrunners, and it was really refreshing to see. And one of the other things was we actually had depth scoring in that game. I mean, I can't remember the last time we actually had, you know, offense coming from a line that wasn't the top line or wasn't from like one of our star guys, I guess. Because one of the lines that scored was actually the 26, 27, and 28 line, which is Grayson Downing, Michael Bunting, and Jeremy Morin. So totally awesome to see them score a goal. Really exciting to see Michael Bunting score. I've sort of been watching him all season. He was pretty good in Sault Ste. Marie. And I feel like he's always sort of been on my radar, and I think he's a lot better player than his stats say, so absolutely means the world to me to see that happen. Scored another goal last night, so super exciting to see not only him score, but that depth scoring, which is really going to be important to us come next season, because let's face it, I don't really think we're going to make the playoffs this year. However, of course, there are still problems. I mean, the previous game, all the problems from the previous game in the previous months were not just erased by a pretty good, you know, loss, because at the end of the day it was a loss. I think our biggest problem in, you know, through it all is, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, I would say it's a lack of chemistry, because there are so many new guys being flown around and flung around, and I don't know if we have chemistry with any of them, because the guys that we had at the beginning of the season when we were doing really good, a lot of them are gone now. Like, Brendan Perlini, I should say, is gone. Obviously, Craig Cunningham hasn't been playing. Henrik Samuelsson was traded. You have a bunch of guys who have been moved here and there. Now Christian Fischer's gone. And at one point, our fourth line, oh my gosh, you know it's my favorite fourth line. It was Hunter Fisch, Trevor Cheek, and Lindsey Sparks. Those three guys made a very powerful fourth line, and while they might not have gotten on the score sheet quite a bunch, they still made a very big impact where they were always getting the puck in and they were always getting good opportunities. And in fact, I actually have one of my drafts on Twitter is still a tweet about when Hunter Fisch hit the post, because he had so many good opportunities like that, and I just wanted him to score, so I still have one about that. Reminds me of the good old days. And all three of those guys, Fisch, Cheek, and Sparks, they're not there anymore. Fisch and Sparks are down in ECHL, and Cheek was released. So a lot of our guys that we used to have really good, you know, good opportunities with and gelled really well together are now gone. And I think that's where a lot of our problems come from. And you saw that sort of in the last game because we actually, two guys who originally had perfect chemistry, Fischer and Mueller, actually were not playing together anymore. Mueller was centering the second line and Fischer was still on the top line. So there you sort of see where earlier in the year they were perfect together. They had so much great chemistry. Them two and Perlini were just perfect. Like you couldn't make a better line. And so then they're gone. And I think that's a very good reason as to why Christian Fischer is now up in the NHL. I actually find it kind of funny that Fischer is doing so good in the NHL when he was struggling so much in the AHL. And I know you're going to say struggling, like what do you mean he was struggling? Well, I mean, yes, Dave Tippett said, oh, Fischer's been doing really well. Dave Tippett's not exactly right. I felt like when he said that in his pregame interview, he didn't exactly know what he was talking about because Christian Fischer was actually averaging just half a point per game in the AHL. Now that sounds great. I mean, wouldn't you like to have that in the NHL? But on the other side of the token, back in November, which was actually the only full month that he played in the AHL, Brendan Perlini actually had averaged 1.3 points per game. So that is considerably higher than Fischer's 0.5 points per game. And out of the last 11 contests, Fischer's actually, out of the 11 contests specifically in February, which I know was a terrible month for the Roadrunners, but that was his time since he came back from the All-Star game, which is when he really started struggling, which is something I wanted to focus on. Out of the 11 games, he had only scored, or gotten a point in 5 of them. So Perlini scored in pretty much every single game, and it was actually pretty much, getting goals in every single game, because that's his type of play, and Fischer hasn't been. He's barely been getting points as it is, much less goals. Now I know you might be thinking, oh, Christian Fischer's not supposed to be Brendan Perlini, but he is. He is their star player, because when Brendan Perlini was named to the All-Star team for the Roadrunners, along with Kyle Wood. And when he was gone, he was then replaced by Christian Fischer. So, in theory, pretty much, Christian Fischer is our star player. He is our Brendan Perlini, now that he's gone. He needs to be our leading scorer. Now, granted, he doesn't need to play exactly like Perlini did, or score as many goals, but he still needs to be a good player. He needs to be a star player. And frankly, he's been struggling, and he hasn't really had those qualities. I mean, the way you see him play now is completely different than when you saw him play before. I mean, he's just not getting the same chances he is, and he's just sort of all around struggling with the puck. On the contrary, though, Christian Fischer has 3 goals in 4 games in the NHL, and besides Austin Matthews, I really don't know many, 19-year-old kids who can do that. I mean, that's downright incredible. I can't really ask much more from the kid. I actually found it funny because I looked up his Corsi stats because I'm a sucker for advanced stats, looked them up, and from his 4 NHL games, he actually has a Corsi for of 34%. Pretty funny stat there, but honestly, that Corsi doesn't matter. He's honestly playing on the 4th line right now, and has been in the past, and he's scoring. Doesn't really matter. Corsi's just for a fun thing, so he's an outstanding player in the NHL. I mean, hands down, great kid. I mean, he's going to have a very long career in the NHL. So that sort of begs the question, I would say, of why was Fischer struggling so much in the AHL and doing so good in the NHL? And pretty much his struggles came around after the time he was called up and he was sent to the All-Star game. Now, what my explanation for it all is that it has to be a mind game with Fischer. And I actually tweeted about this, but I sort of wanted to express more of my opinions on it in the fact that Fischer, when he went up to the NHL the first time before the All-Star break, he was doing incredible. I mean, obviously, in the 3 games he was there, he had 2 goals. He was pretty much a goal per game guy. He was incredible. He was insane. He was the next phenomenon that we were all watching. He was definitely a sight to see. He was something that drew people in. And then he was told that he wasn't good enough. There were parts of his game that Tippett didn't like. So then he was sent down. And in his mind, and pretty much everybody else's mind, he was like, hey, I'm an NHLer, I'm a good player. I mean, I've heard him say so. I listened to him on a local radio show, and he was like, hey, I know I can be a good player. I know how good I can be when I play. And he's like, I just try to play to those strengths kind of thing. So he's aware that he's good, and he was probably aware at the time, as was everybody else, except apparently Dave Tippett, that he was an NHLer at that time. He's not an AHLer. So then when he got sent down, there was just sort of this mess up mentally to where he was like, I'm good enough to be in the NHL, but I'm not in the NHL, and now I have to play in the AHL, and I have to play differently, and maybe I have to work on these parts of my game that Tippett didn't like, which were obviously good enough for the NHL. Tippett just didn't like them. So now he's like all flustered trying to rethink his game when obviously his game was already good enough. So the Fischer we used to know completely disappeared because he thought that wasn't good enough. I think that's why he struggled so much in the AHL. He was doing good in the AHL, but he was like, hey, it's not good enough to get me to the NHL, and that's what matters. I don't care if I do good in the AHL if it's not good enough to get me to the NHL. Which, completely understand, the AHL, most guys aren't really like, hey, I want to stay here forever. Everybody wants to make it to the NHL, so I completely understand that, and I think that's why he struggled so much. But it doesn't really matter now because I'm pretty sure he is going to stay up in the NHL for the rest of the season, and it will be great to see him play there for the rest of the season and probably all of next season and seasons to come, because this kid is an absolute brilliant kid, and I miss him already. I met him. I'm thankful I did that. I have a nice little picture of us together, but I think I will always miss seeing him play at the TCC because this kid is something special.